Welcome to Best PlayStation Reviews by Classic Game Room, a mighty collection of some of my favorite PS1 reviews that I've produced over the years for games like Tekken 2, Twisted Metal 2 Loaded, Assault Rigs, N2O, and one of the greatest video games ever created in the history of the universe. Hang on to something because I'm kicking this off with the review of Omega Boost, which is right up there over my shoulder. So when I want to play it, I know exactly where it is. Enjoy!
Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the intergalactic space arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything.
I want to review a game. How about this one? It is fun and has robots.
Let's do a joint review, a re-review of one of my favorite games in existence. This is the incredible Omega Boost.
He's right. This game is legit.
Released in 1999 for the PlayStation from Polyphony Digital, better known for their Gran Turismo series, this is one of the greatest video games ever in the history of ever. It's the almighty Omega Boost, which has as its mechanical design advisor and supervisor Shoji Kawamori of Macross fame, who I think also directed the intro sequence, and you can see a Macross influence in there for sure. But it's not just robots, explosions, and great music that make Omega Boost good, it's everything, most importantly.
It's all good. Carry out the mission carefully.
The gameplay is stunning. It is all good. Every time I play Omega Boost, it's all good. It's always fun. Here's what you do. You fly your robot around and destroy everything. It's kind of a shooter on rails. In fact, this game does have a lot in common with Panzer Dragoon. We reviewed this for the original series of Classic Game Room when it was new in 2000, and I've loved it ever since and have played a lot more games like Panzer Dragoon, so I can definitely draw a comparison now.
Carry out the mission carefully.
You lock onto enemies and launch guided missiles, or just gun them down with your laser machine gun. Either way, you win, right? At the end of each round, you fight an end boss, and depending on how well you do, you can level up your Omega Boost missile things, and those are quite important, so mastery of each level is critical, because the last couple levels, or the last two levels, are tough. You're scored, and you can basically increase the number of lock-ons that you're able to target at once. Very important when blowing up the harder end bosses. It's not a very long game, but one that's immensely fun to play over and over again. The production values are amazing. I think this runs on the Gran Turismo, the original Gran Turismo engine.
I like the part where the computer goes crazy and kills everyone.
And while the excellent Gran Turismo series lives on, it's a shame, in fact it's a downright crime, that Omega Boost does not. There haven't been any sequels as of this recording, but it's a huge cult favorite. Anyone who's played this game loves it. And I think it's gone on to inspire a lot of other good spaceship games like Strike Suit Zero and Project Sylphie, just to name two.
Caution.
The controls are great. It's kind of hard to describe since I've been playing this game on and off for about 14 years now. It just feels natural. You lock onto targets, shower enemies with missiles, and dart around the screen, avoiding bad guys, laser fire, and all kinds of other nasties. Once you've reached a level, you can play it over and over again to practice. That's definitely important. Level 5 in particular is a real pain in the ass.
Be careful.
The game looks and sounds great, and more than a decade and a half after its release, Omega Boost is still remarkably playable and fluid. This game really hasn't aged all that much, and if you're only going to buy 5 PlayStation games, make sure that Omega Boost is on your list.
I love Omega Boost as much as I love bacon.
It's a game worth playing and reviewing over and over and over again. Polyphony Digital's remarkable Omega Boost.
You know, you should re-review Herzog's Y on the Genesis. And bacon. I love bacon.
Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Actual power! I was thinking about doing the entire review like that. This is Twisted Metal 2 from 1996 for the PlayStation, the second installment in the popular and awesome vehicular combat series being played here on PlayStation 3. This was originally released for the gray PlayStation 1 way back in the day. Love that thing. And I love this game. I like pretty much all the Twisted Metal games. If you played any of them, this is exactly what you would expect it to be. A bit larger, a bit more fun than the first game in the series. And they've gone on to be all pretty much the same, but just with little improvements here and there. This one has my favorite guy, Axel. Axel's great. He's also a really good singer. That never gets old, and neither does the vehicular combat genre. I feel like it's really underrepresented these days. We need more Twisted Metal games and Vigilante. Just keep them coming. Twisted Metal 2? No. How about Twisted Metal 2084? The 2084th entry in the series, where you also just happen to battle robots and brain people while running over the last human family on Earth. Twisted Metal 2. What a value for a good time as well. The PlayStation 1 games are legitimately retro now. They're like encroaching on Sega Genesis and NES territory. Like, there was once a time when the PS2 was new and the PlayStation 1 was just kind of the last generation, sort of the way the Xbox 360 is now as I'm recording this in 2017 while fighting space bees wearing a miniskirt. Let's get back on track here as we destroy enemies with a wide variety of vehicles through a nice collection of environments around the world. It's a good-looking game. It's Twisted Metal. Best enjoyed with a friend, of course, but still fun by yourself. Play through the tournament mode, just play levels individually. There's a bunch of cheat codes. You can find them online to unlock some extra vehicles. And like so many of my other favorite action games, this one has health kits. It's very important that you memorize each level and know where the health kits are, especially if you're driving one of the faster, more delicate vehicles, although I don't know why you would do that. You should always go with the biggest, heaviest, strongest truck or guy with wheels on his arms when playing Twisted Metal, in my opinion. They do and can withstand the most damage, although I do like that one race car's cyclone move where it picks up cars and spins them around. That's pretty cool. The game is great. I mean, there's really not much more I can say other than it's awesome. I mean, I feel like if you haven't played a Twisted Metal game, you're missing out. This probably isn't the first one I would start with at this point. They've made newer ones. And for the most part, it's a winning formula. You get into some sort of a killer death car straight out of Mad Max, and you destroy your opponents with lasers, fire missiles, and machine guns. So it's sort of like your daily commute, but even better. gotta love the music in this level, and the spin death move, although this car could not withstand much damage. Annoyingly, I never had this game when it was new. But what's surprising is that for a 1996 release, it still plays really well. Great controls. It looks good on the PlayStation 3. And the audio design is clear enough so you can make out the details when he screams, "Axle power!" Still think I should just do the rest of the review by shouting that. And of course, I have an Axle Power fueled classic game room shout out, and thank you going to Daniel from Hope, Idaho, for sending this to the show. It's a lot of fun, and I'm working on my complete Twisted Metal collection. I've actually got a couple more of these to review. These games are probably best known for their multiplayer, just crashing into your friends and destroying them, but they're also fun just playing through them, playing through the tournament. And you can pick up Twisted Metal 2 for all of a whopping $10 to $20 online somewhere. So thank you once again, Daniel. It's always fun to blow things up with moving vehicles while screaming "Axle Power" at the top of your lungs. It's Twisted Metal 2 for the PlayStation. Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the intergalactic space arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Happy New Year from Classic Game Room. It's 2219 AD, and Earth's Star Federation has unleashed the R-grade Advanced Tactical Combat Fighter to save the planet from certain destruction at the hands of the bloodthirsty Cecilia Federation. Woo! In Raystorm. Every year's got its problems. In 2017, it's giant insects. In 2084, it's the Robotrons. In 2219... you'll be facing endless waves of spaceships and giant end bosses with homing lasers. In Raystorm for the PlayStation. The second game in Taito's Ray trilogy of spaceship shooters. Published by Working Designs and Spaz, part of their signature series. Where, by the way, you can win $10,000! Let's do that! Ah, damn it! Just missed it by a few years. Fortunately, the game still looks good and plays great, even in the future. I think it's safe to say if you enjoy vertical scrolling spaceship shooters, you're gonna like this one. Now there's a bit of confusion with the first game in the series, originally called Ray Force. I reviewed it on the Sega Saturn twice, each time with a different name, Layer Section and Galactic Attack. Neither of which are called Ray Force, but they're both Ray Force, and this is Raystorm, and then there's a game after this called Ray Crisis. And to add even more confusion, I just reviewed an extremely fun driving game from Taito on the PlayStation called Ray Tracers, which has a similar font on the cover. They just love their Rays over there at Taito, don't they? Well, they do make good games. We all know that. And while Raystorm holds its value, it's worth every penny. Although if you really want your best bang for the buck, go for Galactic Attack on the Saturn, published by Acclaim, which automatically makes it affordable. Now, as you can see, this game looks great. It plays really well. I'm using the PlayStation 3 here. And the music is nice, too. Wait till we get to the desert level. That's my favorite song in the game. You can play 1 or 2 player cooperatively. There's also 2 different ships to choose from. The standard one with a green spread shot, and 8 lock-on lasers, or the one I'm using here, which has a laser shot and 16 lock-on lasers. And I love lock-on lasers. Like, why use missiles when you can use lasers? You have to collect power-ups to get the full number of lock-on lasers. And that's probably the star feature of the Ray games, is that you can blow enemies away with your standard lasers shooting out of the front of your spaceship. And then lock on to ground targets and other ships with your lock-on lasers. You can choose auto lock-on or manual, which is harder but gives you a bigger score with combos. If you lock onto a whole bunch of stuff at once and then blow them away, you get a lot of points. But I found the best scores come with just staying alive, because you get huge bonus points for completing levels. And you can adjust the difficulty for each level. I've been playing the standard difficulty. It's hard, it's a tough game. Can't quite beat it yet on the standard difficulty, but it's not impossible. It's not so frustrating that I just can't take it. I like the game. I think it's fun, it's approachable, it looks good, it sounds good, but it's still not as good as the first one. And it's hard to say why. But I love this music, my favorite music in the game, and the last 2 levels are really nice sounding too. While the Sega Saturn usually gets far more credit when it comes to 2D vertical or horizontally scrolling shooters, the PlayStation does a pretty good job here. It's not as good as the Saturn, admittedly, but when you play it on the PlayStation 3 and output it through HDMI, it looks great. Raystorm is totally a must-have as far as I'm concerned. Don't forget you've got a special attack which comes in handy, and of course the game will save your high scores as well. Now I've got a classic game room shout out and thank you to send to a familiar friend, Ahmed from Springfield Gardens, New York. Thank you for Raystorm, highly recommended. And if you think this looks fun, which it is, don't forget to play Ray Force, Galactic Attack Layer Section, and I think it's also called Gunlock in Europe. Here's hoping the next game is simply called Ray's Fist of Laser on the Dreamcast. You can email Taito and ask when that's coming out. Until then, enjoy some Raystorm on your PlayStation, PlayStation 2 or PS3.
Welcome to Classic Game Room for the long overdue review of the original Sony PlayStation, the PS1. I used to have one of these way back in the day. Played Gran Turismo, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy Tactics, Bushido Blade, and countless other games on it. I just picked this one up recently. It's in great shape, so let's check it out. The Sony PS1, the original one, the first one.
Here it is in a photo shoot. Allow me to present my brand new old PlayStation 1. I used to have one of these back in the day. I think I bought one in 1997. And sadly I sold that one off in the early 2000s. I'm not even sure why, but I wish I had hung on to it, obviously. These days you can pick up a new PS1 for one of these models for 20, 30, 40 bucks. There's a lot of them out there. They're not in high demand because other things play PlayStation 1 games, like your PlayStation 2 and your PlayStation 3. But I love the PlayStation 1. I love the PS1 era. I love a lot of the games on the PlayStation 1. Some of my favorites like Bushido Blade, Front Mission 3, Omega Boost, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy Tactics, and a myriad array of spaceship shooters, the Gran Turismo games. There's so many great PlayStation 1 games. I think that when you look back in video game history, the PlayStation 1 had as much impact on the game industry as the Nintendo Entertainment System. It came out about 10 years after the NES. The NES debuted in 1985. PlayStation 1 hit the US in 1995. And it appealed to a very different kind of consumer at that time. And in 1995, that was like at the very end of the Sega Genesis era, the end of the 16-bit era. And the first time I saw PlayStation 1, I'm pretty sure they were showing Battle Arena to Shinden, one of the early fighting games in Electronics Boutique or Babbage's or something. And I was impressed, but I wasn't like blown away. You know, I mean, it had a different look. It had more of like the 3D arcade style that was starting to come into vogue at that time. But I wasn't sold on a PlayStation until I saw Final Fantasy VII. At a friend's dorm, they were playing Final Fantasy VII, and I was like, whoa, this is what they're doing with video games now. So I saved up my money, bought a PlayStation 1, and we just played the hell out of that thing in college, all the way into the late 90s, and eventually replaced it with a PlayStation 2. That's probably why I sold it, actually, was to buy a PlayStation 2. Not a bad trade-up, if you ask me. Now, the original PS1 is, in my opinion, a very attractive game system. It looks totally different than the other game systems from the time. It has a different look than the NES, than the Genesis, than the Saturn, the Jaguar, Neo Geo, any of that stuff. There's nothing, like, it's unmistakable that it's the PS1. I love the circular door. Like, you know this thing plays discs. Look at it. It plays discs, which were pretty new at the time. In fact, when this came out, CD players were really expensive. And the fact that the PlayStation could double as a CD player was a big selling point. It had memory cards, not something that you would typically get with a game system back in the day. Your Genesis, Super Nintendo, they didn't have memory cards. The PlayStation logo was very cool when it was new. At the time, this was amazing. And to look at it now like a piece of history, it's kind of neat. I like the PlayStation 1 and what it did for the game industry. It moved video games into this new era, away from the traditional arcade games, away from games where scores always had to be on screen, into a new era of 3D games, of ambitious Japanese game development, and there's just so many great PlayStation 1 games. You gotta love this thing. The controller was really innovative, too. I'm glad to have one again. Let's plug it in and do what it does, play some awesome games on the PlayStation 1. What should we start with? What game in my PlayStation collection should we fire up first here? Oh, Raystorm, so good. Vandal Hearts, there's so many good games for this thing. Mobile Light Force, with Charlie's Angels flying spaceships. Crash Team Racing, Vandal Hearts 2. Oh, man, where to start? You know what I haven't played in a while? Is Einhander, actually. Let's fire up Einhander on the PlayStation 1. I'm embarrassed to admit that I have not played Einhander in a bit, so... this game was not that expensive 10 years ago. These days, it's really pricey. And I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to be very good at it anymore. It's a tough game. Just bought this for like 30 bucks, and one of the analog thumbsticks is all wonky on the controller. Fortunately, I have a few other ones, but this will do for now.
There was a time in the era of great chaos when the Earth and the Moon were at war with each other.
I love this game. There's so many great games on the PlayStation. It's a really fun game system to collect for, but getting more expensive by the day, because the PlayStation is legitimately retro now. So something like the PlayStation 2 is starting to be retro, just a little bit. PlayStation 3 is dirt cheap, but PlayStation stuff is nearly as old as Genesis and Super Nintendo stuff. So the popular games, or the games I should say that are in demand, like Einhander, they command some big bucks these days. A lot of the other ones you can still get on PlayStation Network, or in greatest hits collections, like Jet Moto cost me all of $5. Let's fire this up. But collecting for the PS1 is fun. Just don't overspend on it. The spaceship shooters and the RPGs can be pricey. I'm gonna die so quickly. It's been a while since I've played this. PlayStation games, when done right, had a great look to them. Woo! Get out of my way, stupid space police! Oh man. That's right. You look super cool. God, this game's good. I should just re-review it for yucks. Here's my review of Einhander. One of the best spaceship shooters ever. So buy it now. If you can afford it, which you probably can't, because it's ridiculously expensive now. I'm really glad I collected a lot of games like 10 years ago, before the prices got crazy. I'll have that, thank you. Oops. If I had to run down the list of my favorite game systems of all time, my personal favorite game systems of all time, the PlayStation is up there. It's probably top 5. Because obviously there's Sega Genesis, Atari 2600, Vectrex, which then brings me to like PlayStation 1 and probably PlayStation 2. And the NES is up there also, but yeah, it's really one of the best game systems of all time. So, if for some reason you don't have a PlayStation, you should at least have a PS2. That'll give you plenty of good games to play. That's awesome! Like, this was doing things that games didn't do in the 90s. Traditional Genesis and NES games. Yeah! I've won, it's over! Oh wait, there's more! No! Who knew? Well, oh, you always want to get away from the death beam. I knew that, I just went the wrong direction.
Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room, where I have a game for those of you into chemistry and Tempest. This is Nitrous Oxide for the PlayStation. Featuring the smooth, easy listening sounds of Crystal Method. Released in 1998, Nitrous Oxide will surprise you. It's one of the best games that I've played on the original PlayStation. If you like arcade-style games, that is. It's definitely inspired by Tempest, Gyrus, and other tube shooters. And I love when developers try to put a storyline to a game that simply doesn't need one. But in Nitrous Oxide, you're not just fighting for points, you're fighting to come home for milk and cookies. That's in the instruction manual, milk and cookies. This game owes me milk and cookies. This would have come out around the time when Crystal Method was getting pretty big, and I think most of these songs come off their Vegas album, which is their best. At least I think so. And their music fits the game perfectly, there's no question. It also fits a lot of commercials and movies. So if you like Crystal Method and you like this game, well, you're going to be in heaven. Turn it up and enjoy. So what do you actually do here? Because I'm getting dizzy. You shoot things for points while desperately attempting to stay alive. That's what you do. And there's a lot of different ways that you can score points, more than I can even mention. Hitting things multiple times makes them change color, gives you more points. Enemies will spawn new enemies and basically just shoot stuff and don't get destroyed. You'll collect weapon power-ups, don't save them, use them quickly, especially when the tube starts to fill with enemies. Pick up shields, and then you may want to cash some of those credits in for firewalls, which just shoot all the way down the tube, wiping out everything. This is one of these games that you just pick up the more that you play it. It's a lot of fun. I really like Nitrous Oxide. And I love that it has a story. Let's read it. Somewhere deep in the future, our galaxy is at war. On the nearby planet of Neptune, forces of evil have initiated their new plans to invade the Earth. By accelerating subatomic particles around a tubular-shaped circuit known as the Teras, they are developing a race of super warriors. Together with advanced genetic engineering, this central birthing canal is capable of producing an army of lethal genetically mutated insects. So what you need is a giant can of Raid, not a spaceship. Nitrous oxide, a pollutant byproduct emitted inside the Teras, provides a high-octane fuel for your tunnel runner, which is an Atari game, by the way. But unfortunately, it also provides the perfect breeding environment for the secretly incubating species. So your mission: set a course for Neptune, fly tunnel runner into nitrous oxide-filled tubes, destroy super warriors, and come home for milk and cookies. Which had better not be a lie. That thing was the firewall. You can also brake before you run into some of the genetically engineered mutant spiderwebs. There's also several spaceships to choose from, and it's just a great game. Why have I never heard of this? So now's the time for a classic game room shout out, and thank you to Mark from Fresh Meadows. Once again, the world's biggest Gyrus and Tempest fan. Why am I not surprised you sent this? It's really good. I highly recommend Nitrous Oxide, especially if you like those other games or futuristic racing games in general. The music is great. It helps that I enjoy Crystal Method. You can choose which tracks you want to hear. It runs smoothly, it looks good, and it just fills the room with sound and color. It's really nice. They should make more of these. If they haven't already, this is immediately likable. Once you start playing Nitrous Oxide, I think you'll love it if you're into these kinds of games. So thanks again to Mark, formerly from Brooklyn, New York. I'm gonna need a bigger map one of these days. Nitrous Oxide can be found affordably out there. I highly recommend it. It runs on PlayStation 3. Turn up the volume, blow up some insects, and fight for the future of milk and cookies, but only if it's whole milk and double stuffed Oreos.
Welcome to Classic Game Room for the review of a fighting game that I was really good at about 20 years ago, Tekken 2 for the original PlayStation. Tekken 2 released in 1996 for the Sony PlayStation. You know that scene from Shaun of the Dead when he's yelling at his friend about how they once stayed up all night drinking apple schnapps playing Tekken 2? I feel like that scene was written for me. Some games bring you back to a time in your life. Maybe it's a good time, maybe it's a bad time, but it's a time, a very specific, very memorable time. And for me, Tekken 2 is the second half of my senior year of college. When me and my friends sat around all day, pretty much done with school, drinking beer, getting fat while playing Tekken 2. It was amazing. I never want to do it again. But whenever I see this game, I just remember how much fun that was. How much good, irresponsible fun Tekken 2 delivered back in the day. I was really good at this game once. I've forgotten more about Tekken 2 than I'll ever learn again. And my friend Mike once took a television down to the beach at Senior Week. Mike, I know you're listening, so you probably remember this, where we hauled a case of Coors Light outside and sat around all day while other people were, having fun and socializing, and drank beer and played Tekken 2 in the sunshine. That's how to enjoy the great outdoors. It probably prevented us from getting in trouble, to be honest. Tekken 2 may have saved my life, or at least prevented a serious hangover. I mean, Coors Light wasn't going to do any damage at that point. After a week of drinking rum, Coors Light is like rehydration. I don't know how I made it out of the 90s. It's like Al Jorgensen said, if you remember the 90s, you weren't there. Perfect. That's about right, except I do remember that Yoshimitsu was my guy. And I loved this game. The funny thing about Tekken 2 is that while it looks really dated today, it still plays extremely well. It's a sharp and responsive game. If you're buying a Tekken game for your PlayStation 1 these days, I'd actually direct you to Tekken 3. There's just more of it. It's a bigger game. But if for some reason you want to relive that night, where you stayed up all night drinking apple schnapps playing Tekken 2, this is the game to play. But I would pass on the apple schnapps. If you truly want to relive the 90s, go straight to Goldschlager. Ugh. What about Tekken 2 makes it so good? Well, my vision is clouded by nostalgia. I'll just admit that going into this. Basically, it's just a fun, playable game. At the height of the fighting game genre, Tekken came out and delivered a solid 3D fighting experience. It's hard to remember now. In fact, I don't think you could really even appreciate this unless you were there, but this was the transition period between the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo to the modern 3D-ish era of gaming.
Round 1. Fight!
And people would walk into our dorm room and see Tekken 2 and Final Fantasy VII, and their eyeballs would just pop out of their head, because there was really nothing else like it. And while a lot of games from that era may have seemed good at the time, they don't play well today, Tekken 2 still does. It still plays well. It even looks pretty good, despite the obvious old-school polygons. It's a solid fighting game.
Fight!
I'm a bit rusty. It took 20 minutes to beat the game on easy with Yoshimitsu, my guy. I just don't remember all of his cheap moves. He was such a dirty player.
Round 2. Fight! KO! Final round. Fight!
As you can probably tell, it's a fast fighting game. The matches can end really quickly depending on how good your opponent is. If you know what you're doing, it only takes a couple of moves. And while I haven't had this game for years, I'm sure I sold it a long time ago, this copy was sent to the show. I've got a huge classic game room shout out and thank you going to David from Springfield, Ohio. Thank you, David, for bringing back all of these wonderful memories. Tekken 2 is a great game, and I always really enjoyed the arcade mode. When you fight your way through with each character, you'll fight one of the sub-bosses whom you then unlock. So there's actually quite a few characters in here. Another one of my favorites was Log. I forget his name, we just called him Log. I don't even remember which one unlocks him.
Round 2. Fight! Yup!
Here's a look at the game, brings back some memories, although I don't know if mine was the greatest hits or not. More than a sequel, the undisputed #1 fighting game on the planet. That's a bold claim. Tekken 2, and I love the PlayStation games that had ads lurking beneath the disc. Whew, there we go. Soul Blade. And there's the camera. What's up? This is not my original PlayStation, but it will suffice. Put the game in there, turn it on. You gotta love the old PlayStation intro. They need to bring that back. Fun fact, this is the same television that I played this game on back in 1998.
Still works. Really well, in fact. Go, Yoshimitsu, what a surprise. Alright.
Round one. Fight!
Yeah! Helicopter cut! It's never good when you're trapped in between a combo in this game. That always ends poorly.
You win.
That's right. Only took me like 4 tries to do that. I'll edit that part out though.
Fight!
Why? Don't give me the electric noogie! The amazing thing about this television is that it not only withstood a lot of great games, but many beer cans being hurled at it.
Fight!
Take that, Paul. Don't insult me in front of the Statue of Liberty, bitch! Yeah! That looked convincing.
You win.
Uh-oh, law.
Round one.
Law's good.
Fight!
So there you have it, Tekken 2. It's cheap, it's fun, it's a great fighting game, even 20 years later.
Round one. Fight!
It's always a good time for Tekken.
Can't we just talk it out, Law? Come on. I like Bruce Lee movies too, man. Let's be friends.
Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room. Are you ready to drive like a maniac through the congested streets of jolly old England? If so, you're ready for London Racer. Pip pip, cheerio, and welcome to London. Bollocks! It's London Racer for the original PlayStation. Get used to that sound, you're going to hear it a lot. And get used to running into things, you're going to do that a lot in London Racer. A game where you race through London and a few other locations throughout England, always on the wrong side of the road. This is from publisher Davalex out of the Netherlands, and it's the first, I think it's the first in a series of racer games, like London Racer 2, London Racer World Challenge, London Racer Police Madness, and London Racer Destruction Madness. Dig that music. It's such an underwhelming game, yet it has its moments. And fortunately, the London Racer series does get better from here. I played some London Racer 2 on the PlayStation 2, and it's not bad. This one, however, is not only extremely dated, but it's rough around the edges. It is challenging, I'll give it that. Oncoming traffic and the police are definitely your enemies in this game.
This is your first warning.
If you're gonna play this game seriously, you need to go bumper cam to get the best controls, but the fact is there's so many better racing game options on the PlayStation. Need for Speed, Colin McRae Rally, Gran Turismo. This is kind of like a really early version of Need for Speed
Most Wanted. It actually feels a lot like one of the old school test drive games. And credit where credit's due, the background visuals of London are really nice. But the driving isn't so good. There's just nothing remarkable about London Racer from the controls and handling standpoint. Brilliant! Where are you driving? To Sainsbury's to buy a new ZX Spectrum. See, I said it properly again, even though it's a Z. Actually, last time I was in London, I played a different game called London Drinker. That was a hell of a lot of fun.
This is your first warning.
I think the last time I was there, I have fond memories hanging out in the ye old Cheshire Cheese, I think, with a bunch of Australian bartenders. Good times. Back to this. Basically, you just drive through a couple environments. Every time you pass a police car, they start chasing you, and you desperately attempt to outrun them without crashing into something. There's a handful of cars to choose from, all with funny names like the Trafalgar, which looks like a Jaguar. And the course designs aren't too bad either. You're racing against a few other opponents, just trying to win the series. That's the game. And apparently you can run over the speed cameras, so Jeremy Clarkson owes me a thank you. It looks and plays like a mediocre PlayStation-era driving game because that's exactly what it is. However, it's the first in the London Racer series, which gets better from here. So, keep watching the London Racer reviews because Thor from Birmingham in the United Kingdom sent pretty much all of them. So thank you, Thor! Now, what direction is the Theakston's pub? Because I'm gonna park my car and play that other game.
This is your second warning.
Knockout. You win.
Welcome to Classic Game Room, where I've got the review of Star Wars Masters of Teras. Cassie? I have no idea how to pronounce it, but this is one of the few Star Wars games that should have Jar Jar in it so that you could rip the head off of Jar Jar. Fatality.
Chewbacca versus Or.
Star Wars Masters of Teras Kasai? What a bizarre name. You think you'd name your game something people could pronounce. But I do love the inside of the packaging with Boba Fett fighting Luke Skywalker. Great design. Not so sure about the controls though. The PlayStation 1's fighting game lineup is a bit of a mixed bag. There's some really good ones like the early Tekken games.
Easier than shooting wall rats back home.
And some truly terrible ones. This is somewhere in between. Great backgrounds, nice use of these Star Wars licensed characters and music, but it's not a very fluid fighting game. It's terribly rigid, and frankly, I don't think it plays all that well. I think it's supposed to be a weapons-based fighting game where you can fight with your fists or, your Wookiee arms or whatever, but then you can also pull out a blaster or Chewie's crossbow or Luke's lightsaber and fight with that. But I think your most difficult struggle will be your fight against the controller.
Arden Lin versus Fuck. Round 1. Fight.
Half the time you jump, you land and end up facing the wrong direction, and the game feels like it's really struggling to just keep up with itself. It sounds good, but it doesn't play well at all. Virtua Fighter blows this away. And the overwhelming majority of the good moves need to be pulled off with button combos that frequently just don't work. Like you push down, right, and the square button or something to pull off a move, and it doesn't pull off the move, and then you end up getting killed and knocked off the platform, and it's like, damn it, I'd really much rather be playing Virtua Fighter. Or Tekken 2 or 3. This game needs Jar Jar. I'm gonna go on record for saying that. Here's a video game that could use Jar Jar as a punching bag, so you could decapitate him and shove his head down his neck.
I'd better be getting paid for this.
Also, I'm deeply offended that Luke Skywalker is not invincible in this game. He's the frickin' star of Star Wars. He's a Jedi Knight with a lightsaber. You'd do more damage playing as an Ugnaught with a squirt gun. While there's a number of good Star Wars characters to choose from, like Han Solo and Chewbacca and Boba Fett, where's Lando Calrissian? How do you expect a Star Wars game to be Lando without Lando? Like, Lando Calrissian should just float into the room and be like, I'm the administrator of this facility, and everyone's head should just explode. Fatality, he wins, every time. Yes, it looks good. The backgrounds are great. The music is good, obviously. How do you screw up the Star Wars music? But the fighting, well, the fighting is the game's weak point, and that's kind of a problem, seeing as how it's a fighting game. Even pre-screwed up prequels Darth Vader can't save this one. So here's what you do to fix this one. Go back in time and reskin Bushido Blade with all of the Star Wars characters. Problem solved. And while you're there, you may as well send Jar Jar back to the future. A future where he's eaten alive by Sharkticons. On that note, I've got a classic game room shout out and thank you to send to Nick from Shanghai, China. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for sending Star Wars Masters of Teras Kasai. It should be Masters of the Universe. He-Man and Skeletor fighting together against Jar Jar. They can feed him the Battle Cat while Teela cheers as she jumps up and down and waves pom-poms. Doesn't everyone think like this? Far from the best Star Wars game and not even close to the best fighting game. Although I do like the Konami Hyperstick. Watch my review of that thing. May the Force be with you. Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room, where it's time to play Ray Tracers, which is like Chase HQ in the future, so you know this game's gonna be good. So you like Chase HQ? Well, you're gonna love Ray Tracers, a 1996 release for the Sony PlayStation. This is the Japanese version. Choose your car and driver, then prepare to run over enemies and destroy end bosses for big points. It's like your morning commute, except even awesomer. Your objective is simple. Make it to the boss battle as quickly as possible so you have time to spare. Crash into them until they explode and earn points along the way. All with a giant smile on your face. Ray Tracers is a lot of fun, even if it's simple. And relatively short. Good news, this is also available in the West and it's really, really cheap. Your car doesn't take damage, but you will be slowed down if the enemies shoot you or you run into the sides of the road. And you'll lose the level if time runs out. Save your nitro for the boss battles. You've only got a limited supply of that. Driving-wise, I was gonna say Raystorm. I just reviewed Raystorm and talked about Ray Force and Ray Crisis, but this is Ray Tracers. Taito loves their Ray games. Not to be confused with Raystorm. In Ray Tracers, you're driving one of 4 cars, not flying spaceships. But there's enemies waiting to be destroyed, except instead of locking onto them with homing lasers, you're going to crash into them repeatedly until they explode. It's a fun game. Sadly, it's not very long, though. There's only 5 levels. And I beat the game like the 3rd time I played it, so there's not a whole lot to it. It's just good fun for a short while. But wait, you're not just destroying cars and trucks, there's also hovercrafts and airplanes and monster trucks to destroy by running into them. This is the green car, which is the slowest but strongest. And in this game, you definitely want strength over speed. As you can see on screen, Ray Tracers looks good and runs smoothly for a PlayStation 1 era driving game. I'm enjoying this on my PlayStation 2, my Japanese PS2, with component cables to bring the most out of the game. I actually really like it. It's not a fancy game. There's no surprises. You just run into things until they explode. There's also a time attack mode. The only replay value you'll get is the scoring system. If you take your time to destroy all the enemies on the track, you'll score more points, but then that leaves you less time to blow up the end bosses. Not that most of them are really all that tough anyway. The driving style is purely an arcade driving style, as you can probably tell. For less than $10, if you can find a copy of Ray Tracers, I recommend it. I think it's good fun for a short while. I wish there was more to it, but you know, it's a neat game for the era, and you do transform into a robot. Oh no, I can't give away the ending, so you'll just have to wait and see. There's robots. And Daft Punk. Good times in Ray Tracers. So I've got a classic game room shout out and thank you to send to Christoph of Arnstadt, Germany. Thank you for sending Ray Tracers to the show in space. The end race is a bit tough, but I got through it, took a couple tries in the slow car, and the ending cutscene is totally worth it, especially if you like Prowl from the Transformers. Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room, where I'm not loaded, but this game sure is. It's loaded on the PlayStation from 1995. A game that claims to turn the laws of physics upside down. It's a bold claim. Let's see if it delivers. You're a maniac whose mission is to be a maniac in 1995's Loaded for the Sony PlayStation. Being played here on PlayStation 3. Take control of one of 6 mutants and splatter enemies all over the place as you attempt to escape from a prison filled with all kinds of bizarre enemies trying to stop you. Show them who's boss. Loaded is actually quite fun in small doses. Its biggest problem is the control scheme. While it looks and feels a bit like Smash TV meets Crusader, it really could have used that twin-stick style shooter control scheme found in games like Smash TV and Robotron. Instead, you aim in the direction that you're running, and you can also strafe. Stylistically, Loaded is great. It's got that mid-90s, we're gonna push the envelope and make the game ultra-violent, and really fun because of it, look and feel. But it does get repetitive quickly. Don't expect a whole lot of level variation here. Basically, every level is the same. You're hunting down some control cards that you need to open the doors, and you kill everybody and then escape. Moving on to another level, which is obviously going to be more challenging. It starts to get pretty tough by about level 3 when you're being attacked by rats and zombies, and it's easy to get lost. So you may want to play with a pencil and paper if you decide to tackle Loaded, which can be found easily these days for a good price. While it looks cool and sounds great, it plays like an early game in this genre. It's a bit half-baked, kind of like all of the Maniacs that you're playing. One of the highlights that I'm not showing here is that you can play Loaded co-op with a friend. 2 of you on screen, raining hell from above. Loaded is a bit unbalanced. You'll run out of ammo quickly and then go down to your base weapon, which does practically no damage at all after level 3 and 4. You can save, but the game crashed on me several times on PS3 while I was trying to do that, so I just went right through it, using some continue codes I found on the internets. I'm still not clear why you'd want to collect all of the money, but the real fun here is just experiencing this mid-90s ultra-violent gory blast from the past. There's no doubt this is a 1995 release, and it is pretty cool because of it. It plays well, even though the controls could have been better. Freedom! Freedom. The music is nice, fits the game well, definite mid-90s style here once again. It was that time when maybe you were just getting tired of platformers like Mario and Sonic and wanted to just mow down enemies with lasers and watch them explode into blood and guts. Loaded delivers that, even if it's repetitive in the process. Do I recommend the game? Well, I think there's better games out there in this genre from the period, like Crusader No Remorse, one of my favorite, a game that has a great plot. The plot of this game is just kill everything. So there's not a whole lot of motivation other than the fact it is fun in small doses, probably best enjoyed with a friend. And on that note, I have a classic game room shout out and thank you to send to a friend to Thor in Birmingham, England. Thank you, Thor. Thank you for sending Loaded and the sequel, Reloaded. Followed by the sequel after that, Damn, My Head Hurts the Next Day. And it has a flamethrower, so at least you can burn maniacs even if you can't cut them in half. It's Loaded. Relive the 90s without it being blurry this time around. Vanished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the intergalactic space arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. This is Assault Rigs for the PlayStation, released in 1995 from the geniuses at Psygnosis, a game that's been sitting on my shelf for a while. I love the intro, which takes you from the birth of video games with Pong all the way through what I assume is a mockery of Doom, into this mid-90s virtual reality simulator. I looked at this game on my shelf the other day and I'm like, I like to blow things up with tanks. That sounds like fun. I've got a bunch of PlayStation games in the queue right now. And I read the back of the box, which starts with Assault Rigs is the cyberspace culture clash for trigger-happy net junkies. Anything that has the word net junkies is automatically good. A computer combat zone where corporate champions do battle for heaps of dirty cash. So basically this game has predicted esports. Because that's exactly what you do. You blow things up in cyberspace with virtual tanks. And Assault Rigs is a surprisingly good game on the PlayStation. How could it not be good when the intro morphs into Tron? So think of this game like a combination of an old-school first-person shooter like Doom or Duke Nukem 3D and Twisted Metal with tanks, because that's exactly what it is. You're driving in a first-person shooter, battling enemy tanks, collecting gems, and unlocking or opening the escape. It's a tricky game, but one that plays surprisingly well more than 2 decades after its release on the PlayStation, where a lot of these first-person shooter-style games did not play terribly well. Or at least certainly not by today's standards. It takes a little while to get used to the controls, but they're actually pretty good for a game like this. You're not aiming up or down, which helps you move around with the D-pad, and then you can strafe with the L1 and R1 buttons on your PlayStation controllers. I'm actually playing this on the PlayStation 3, where you can see it looks and sounds really good. Or at least it looks and sounds really dated. I actually kind of like the music and the ridiculous announcer. That was a cool jump, thank you. This is my favorite tank in the game. There's a bunch of tanks to choose from. I always go with the heavily armored one since things shoot at you.
Cool jump.
There's more than 40 levels in the game, and once you get into it, you'll need to play them over and over again to memorize where everything is, which can be tricky at first since the environments all kind of look the same. This reminds me of building my own levels in Duke Nukem 3D back in college, where I would put the cheerleaders everywhere, and then we just shoot them down with rocket launchers. That was always good fun. Entering VR Zone! It sounds a lot like the R Zone, be careful. Now that we're all cyberspace net junkies and have access to the internet, you can easily find the passcodes for each of the levels. But this one's actually quite fun to just sit down, dig into, and play through, especially if you like these mid-90s 3D-ish action games. And assault rigs won't cost you very much. I imagine you can easily find this game somewhere less than $5. However, I have a classic game room shout out and thank you going to Vance from Waterloo, Iowa. Thank you for sending assault rigs to the show in cyberspace. There's a nice selection of weapons to pick up in each arena, like homing missiles and lasers and the minigun. This one is fun, Assault Rigs, which, according to the packaging, has light-sourced 3D graphics, jumps, elevators, trenches, movable blocks, a network 8-player option, and deadly weapon power-ups. Collect the gems that will take you to the next level. This game is more real than reality now.
This is what we wanted to see.